Hey everyone, welcome back to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, or welcome if it's your first time. I'm your host, Troy Hammond, and on today's episode, we're chatting with Pene Barton. Pene is the CEO, 2 months into a job, the new CEO of Crimson Global Academy, which is a product basically building digital high schools globally. Really interesting. I'm keen to chat to Pene. I've been a massive fan of Pene's for many, many years. She's been in the P&C industry, and now that she's a CEO, I'm really curious to find out how she's finding it, how she grew into that, why she grew into that. And so I'm really looking forward to this one. So let's get cracking.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning into the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
You think back to the times that we used to ring our parents and their, company lines and be like, Mum, I don't know what to eat. And she'd be like, make some 2-minute noodles or something. I'm like, holy shit, how did we get away with that as kids? But did you do that? Did you ring your parents?
Oh, definitely. I kind of look back at it now, and then also the behaviours that Hunter has. Yeah, he'll just rock into a meeting. He'll say hi to everyone on the meeting. He'll just start asking questions. I have to mute a lot of the time because it does get inappropriate sometimes. Just whatever is top of mind.
Yeah.
Unfiltered. You're like, okay, let's just mute that again.
I love that. I love it. How do you feel? Do you feel the pressure or the satisfaction of being a CEO, like with your kids? They're going to look at you and think, holy fucking cool. How cool is my mum? Like, do you feel that?
Yeah, I do. Actually, because it was Mother's Day over the weekend on Sunday, and Hunter wrote this card, or his babysitter helped him write this card, and it was just descriptions of his mother. And one of them is like, she likes blank, and his was, she likes working. I'm like, okay, well, he's definitely sort of observant of that, and then sort of below, what's she really good at? Buying me things from her working. So I'm like, okay, he's sort of getting this association, like working hard, that provides for him. Like if he's making that association at 4, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, nice. So, I think my kids are the same. My kids get it a lot more now when they're older. They're 14 and 11. But at the time, they're like, I see Dad on a camera a lot. Yeah, which is great, not great, but it is what it is, and I feel proud that my kids see the person that I am, and the values that that Hunter's going to get from you is cool. Yeah. Do you still have the burger place?
I do. I have. So we have 2 burger places now. Soon to be a 3rd one.
Shout them out. What are they?
So that's Burger Geek. Is the one brand for that, and we've got one in Eden Terrace, we've got one in Grey Lynn, and soon to be one in Highbury over on the shore. So.
Dan used to often take me to Burger Geek, because we had an office, our Talent Army office used to be around the corner from, I'm terrible with in the old Flux Federation building, and we often ate there, had burgers. Always good service too, actually. There was a young guy that worked there. It was really cool.
Wonder if that was my husband, who's sort of always there potentially. He's always on site. Like he's very much on the tools, even though we've got 2 and soon to be 3 sites. Like he hovers between all of them working. So,
Awesome. So you weren't always a CEO and burger empire builder.
Yeah.
And so let's go back a little bit, Pene. Like where did sort of business start for you?
Yeah, I mean, as a child, so we're going well back in time now, there was always some kind of side hustle adventure. I remember, making crafts at home to take to school to sell. Like going home being like, Mum, can you make me a bunch of sherbet? Because sherbet is in demand at school and I need to bundle it up and sell it. As a child.
Wow, that's amazing.
In primary school. And sort of running markets wherever there was sort of demand, I would just try and fill this gap. And then whilst I was studying, I was working multiple jobs. So always had this, I need to be doing multiple things at one time. And then, going into the HR field, sort of a little bit adjacent to that, I could see this opportunity in HR as a whole. And obviously the terminology has evolved since then.
We call it the PX now for the cool people,
PX,
right? Yeah.
People in culture. Yeah. I've got some thoughts on renaming again, but went into the HR field and started out my career in government.
What drew you to HR?
Yeah, I had, actually I have this sort of experience that's burned into my mind. When I was about 15 or 16, I had a friend of mine worked at a cinema and she was late for a shift. instead of having a conversation with her sort of team lead or something at the time, instead of having a conversation with her, I remember her getting pulled in to this very serious HR meeting. There was a letter, there was bring a support person, it was, what steps are you going to take to prevent this in the future? I went along as her support person, and I was just sitting in this meeting going, how can this be how business operates? Couldn't someone have just had a direct conversation, given the feedback in the moment? Why do we have these steps and this paperwork and just this bureaucracy around these tiny little things? And if you have this in an organization for these things, i.e. someone being 5 minutes late, the kind of snowball effect from an efficiency point of view, I remember thinking at the time, this is mind-boggling. So wanted to essentially go into that field because it just felt like very archaic.
To fix it? Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah. It was very archaic. It was very old school. I just wanted people to just talk to each other, right? Be open, have conversations.
Let's share a sherbet.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way,
right?
I've got some sherbet.
$2. Yeah, so I've always had that sort of, this is a industry that was rife for disruption. And it felt like one of the kind of lagging departments or functions in an organization. So that was where I kind of honed in on, that's where I want to go.
So we've never worked together in companies, even though we've sort of been really close, like Venn and Xero and a few places, right? But I have always heard lots about you. And if I was to describe the atypical HR people and culture person, you're probably not someone I would describe.
No.
And so and I loved that, right? Like for people listening, what I'm trying to insinuate here is you were honest, you were raw, you were funky in terms of like trying things. You describe yourself as a bit of a magpie, always chasing technology, right? And I sort of saw that. And so, and for me, it was refreshing, because HR does have a bit of a vanilla, boring approach of people that just sit there and follow the rules and, don't really offer much in terms of culture, even though they call themselves people in culture. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. I always, even now when I think about the people in culture profession, and it's changing so much, which is amazing, but I always felt quite separate to that, quite at odds. I would go to conferences, I would meet people. I'm kind of over here doing these different things, seems to be working in my organizations, but everyone is doing these big, strategic plans over 2 years, and they're running, they want to implement a system and it's a 2-year plan and they're running that. And I'm like, why don't we just do it tomorrow and see where we go? And it always felt quite at odds to the industry as a whole. I think the industry has evolved quite a lot now and definitely moving in that direction, but felt quite separate from that.
Yeah. And so you started in government.
Yep. Yeah. Ministry of Health.
Oh wow!
Working for the Director of Mental Health, which was a fantastic training ground. That was working not actually in the people space, but as close as I could get at that point. It's really hard, or was hard at that point, still is today, to get kind of an HR grad type role. So took an office management role for the Director of Mental Health, who was getting close to retirement age, and so he's like, do all the people stuff, do all my budgets, like I don't have anything I don't need this experience, so do all of it for me. And so it was an incredible training ground to be able to set budgets, hire people, work closely with him in all of his day-to-day works and across that entire department. But it wasn't in the people space, so was there for a couple of years. It was great to get that experience, but was always itching to be like, okay, well, I'm ready to step fully into an HR or people and culture role now.
Yeah. What was your first big role then? Like, what was the role that you think that defined your career?
Definitely my role at Chorus.
Yeah. That was pre-Xero, just pre-Xero?
Yeah, pre-Xero. This was back in 2010, I think, 2011. And that was when Chorus was going through the demerger from what was called Telecom at that stage. Very small, scrappy team.
Telecom, for people that are very young listening to this, is what we call Spark now.
Yeah.
That was back in the day when Vodafone was named Vodafone and Telecom. And
Yeah, definitely. Aging myself on the podcast. So going into Chorus, which I think at that stage there wouldn't have been any other companies that were growing at that speed. That was demerge from an existing large entity, set your own culture, move from a couple of hundred people within an organisation to 450 within 6 months. And then from there we went from 450 to 1,200 within 3 years.
And picked up a lot of awards on the way in terms of people and culture, and did Like my understanding and experience of Chorus at the time, as a recruiter, we're a bit of the, canary in the coal mine, where if something's going poorly, we hear about it. If something's going well, we hear about it. And I always heard really good things about Chorus. You know, like hard work, but did it well.
Yeah, definitely. It was an incredible organisation, and the fact that it had that, what I would think of now, it was well funded. It spun out of something overall. So they invested in people and culture. They were thinking in, we had a 50-year plan, a 30-year plan. Everything was quite intentional in how they operated. But at the same time, because they were a new organisation, that was that energy. There was this, we're doing something different. We're growing really quickly. We can change the world, sort of energy and enthusiasm within it. But at the same time, not necessarily having that constraint of, let's just see how we go to the next funding round or the next funding round from there. So it was all of the great stuff of startups.
What is the great stuff of startups? Like, what was the remit that they said to you where you were like, fuck yeah, this is going to be fun?
I remember designing and rolling out our own values, defining ourselves as an organisation, how our executive team and our leadership team operated, the remit to build leadership capability, which I haven't really seen. Everyone talks about building great leaders, but there's very few organisations that invest the time and the money to do that. So having a bit of a HR generalist, essentially if it's in your teams, you own it. You do it end to end. There's really high autonomy here. We want to build great leaders, so have a remit around that as well. And at that time, I was like early 20s. And so being able to work with the CEO and the executive team and then being like, what should we do? How can we do this differently? It was incredible. I also worked alongside, it comes back in the story later at Xero, my kind of counterpart was Andy Berner. And working alongside him, and he had, just a very complementary skill set, given he'd come more from a recruitment and employment brand perspective, and I was more on that HR generalist, ER side. Together, there was just this really great collaboration in terms of being able to grow that organisation.
Shout out to Andy. Isn't he now a CEO or something from what I saw?
CEO or COO. Over in the US, he's, doing some stuff for the Denver as a whole, kind of representing New Zealand. It's pretty incredible.
Awesome. Good on you, Andy. And so then you're young, right? Young, early 20s. Was there something in you that was always yearning for fast-paced, something more? Yeah.
I actually remember when I was at Chorus, I went to some conference and I saw one of the people team at Xero speak. And they spoke about their values and they spoke about how they were doing the people team. And because I felt like this sort of over here, this outsider, and I remember hearing them speak and went, wow, that's amazing. That is a group of people who all seem to think and act in the same way that I do in regards to people and culture. So I remember then having this, there's this, cool tech scene that's coming up. They have, they have that energy, they have that pace, they have that autonomy. So I remember hearing Xero speak and being like, oh, that's interesting. That's a really cool field. And then when I was at Chorus, I also remember hearing Kirsty Grant speak at Vend. And I went to our chief technology officer at the time and went, wow, we're going to lose so much talent to these startups, to these, there was also Orion Health at the time I'd heard. So I was like, Orion Health, Vend, Xero, they're sort of coming for all of our talent. Like they are building incredible places to work at pace. Like we need to adapt to evolve to this. But at that time we were 1,200 people, would become a lot more.
Things slow down a bit, right? And
as they do when you get to that stage. And it works, and there's no real sort of impetus for change. There's no real need to change. And so at that time I went, okay, I'm ready to go back into what would have been that early stage kind of Chorus feeling, which was startups. So
how big was Xero when you went?
About 500.
So still a startup. Like gateway drug to a big corporate.
It was, and I was working in Auckland at that time, so they moved me up to Auckland, and I think the Auckland office might have been 50, 60 people. So very small in the
in this building, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, we're in the Ice House Ventures today, so if you hear any people making coffee or doing things, we don't own this joint, so very cool. Back here again.
Actually, we worked back here later with Crimson as well, so I feel it's my old stomping ground coming back. So joined Xero, about 500 people, 50, 60 in Auckland, I think, at that time. And they went from, in the time I was there, which was about a year, 500 to 1,000. It's incredible. And in that, I picked up because that's how you do at that point in time.
How do you do that without fucking up? Or is it everyone's going to fuck it up in some way, just less than others?
Yeah, everyone's going to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how I feel about parenting, right? Like, I'm going to fuck it up less than my father for different reasons. No, it's the same as my father for different reasons because I'll learn that and fuck it up in other ways. But people always ask me, and I imagine they ask you the same question, is how do you keep the culture as you scale?
Yeah.
And my answer is always, and I'm curious to know what yours is, you're never going to be able to keep that culture, but you need to keep designing what the new culture is going to be.
Definitely. You can always retain, I think you can retain elements of it if right at the start you're very clear on what it is. And I've seen a lot of early stage startups go for, this is what Amazon do, or this is what Nike do, or this is what XYZ company do, and they go, that is what we will value. That is what our culture is. And they try and, because that's the cool shiny thing at the time, they try and do that, and then they're never going to retain that because it was never their own to start with. I think if you're very clear and very intentional at the start, then as you think about growth, you're kind of looking at adaptations of that.
Yeah. So let's get into that into detail, right? Because someone that, for you that's been in early stage, later stage growth companies.
Yeah.
When you say be intentional about what it is, what do you mean by that? Does that mean like create your values from day one and adhere to them? Or does that mean let it organically grow?
Yeah, I think if you're a founder or CEO or co-CEO and you're starting a company, being really clear, I guess, at first about your own personal values, because in that early stage, when you're involved in every part of the organization's values, to some extent, are going to mirror your own, because those are the behaviors people are going to see day in and day out and try and kind of match them and mirror them from there. So at least do that kind of self-reflection around what are my values.
Yeah.
Is a great starting place before you sort of go and kind of set up organizational values. When you get to, I'd say 10 or 15 people, that's when I would work with that sort of original founding team and go, what is it that we value as an organization? How does that show up? And I'd look to articulate it at that point, and just don't worry too much about the wordsmithing of it. Just what is the intention? What do we value? How would that show up in kind of day-to-day behaviors? The other piece that I would look at is like taking those values and then putting them through the lens of, how would this change how we recruit? How does it change how we promote someone? How does it change how we would interact with a customer? If we say we are, obsessed about quality and someone in the team does something that's at opposites of that, what are we going to do about it? And just stress test them a little bit and worry more about stress testing than the actual wordsmithing of it. Because that's another piece I see people spend a lot of time on trying to make them sound perfect. And then not so much on actually how they translate.
I am 100% in agreement with you, and I think you articulate it way better than I could have before in the past, so I'm going to steal most of that and just say, hey, I've come up with this idea. The stress testing thing is that companies, that's what startups and their key original founding team need to do way more often, is like put themselves in hypotheticals about what's going to happen if this happens. What are we going to do if this situation happens?
Yeah.
And because let's be honest, most people's values they've stolen from like Atlassian, don't fuck the customer, they've stolen from Netflix, they've stolen from, Nike's topical at the moment because of that movie, right? So everyone's talking about that.
Yeah.
But I think in what you say, there is so much more important in that. Put yourself in positions where you can stress test these things because you'll understand the type of company that you're going to be in the future. And so,
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So then you go into zero. 500 to 1,000 people. What the fuck?
Yeah, it was an incredible time. In that space, I was doing HR generalist work. They didn't have an organizational development function. So I was doing what was some of the starting work around diversity and inclusion, working on building sales capability, all hands on deck. You've got an idea, you run with it. Exactly that spirit of startups. Everything is possible. Let's try something, let's iterate on it. And I think as a kind of people and culture person, what startups is really great for is helping you kind of be comfortable with just throwing your work out, right? Being wrong, iterating on something, having everyone tell you that it's a shit idea, and then going back and doing it again, and just operating at that pace and eventually getting to some really great work products. I mean, some of the work that I did then, I'd still have organizations today be kind of reaching out and be like, how did you do that? So it sort of stood the test of time, what we were able to iterate in such a short amount of time.
What are the key things that you think companies should think about if they've got a people and culture team? And I'm going to premise this by saying that I've worked in people and culture teams, and I'm a recruiter who doesn't like to do HR stuff,
Yeah.
right? So, but then I've sat around so many meeting tables where they've been like, let's do this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what the fuck is that going to solve?
Yeah.
You know, that's a waste of time. You're just trying to make yourself look good so that
Yeah.
you can speak at a conference later.
Yeah.
That's not helping this business.
Yeah.
And so what do you think are the key things that people and culture teams can really help, you know, because so you're like what I would call like a chief heart officer, you know, like the heart of the business, thinking about it from a, like, how does the business drive versus a chief HR officer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's always worth, it's going to put me well back on that outside, really thinking about what you want a people and culture team for, right? I have seen people and culture teams just focus on warm, fuzzy stuff that drives no business value, and then, you know, pat yourselves on the back for it. Great. But if you really want an organization that, you know, performs, you know, if you're thinking about what roles we bring on, you know, ahead of the curve, actually what our financials look like from a people perspective, what is the kind of one or two things that we could really do for our people that unlock them? Is it leadership development that's going to unlock our people? Is it expanding into a new market? And then the people and culture team focus on those pieces. Is it building a great employment brand? They do that. But when you mirror other organizations, you go, we need a people and culture function, and you just kind of bring it in to do whatever, it just spins around in circles. But going, what's going to unlock our organization? Is it X, Y, Z? And we're going to focus and we're going to bring in a people team that just does those pieces. Maybe it's measuring productivity could be what you need, people and culture. And then maybe you're bringing in someone who's got a data and analytical background, not a people background. And that's how they're unlocking the organization. Like moving upstream to what is actually blocking our organization could be systems implementation. And that's your problem, not necessarily a people challenge yet. So being really clear about where your challenges are as an organization, what is going to unlock you, and then defining your people and culture team around that, because I think they unlock your organization, they help you scale, they help you grow. But if you don't know where that unlock is coming from, it's very hard to just throw a people and culture function in and expect that they're going to have the right skills and capability to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I may have an agenda here because I own a people and culture consultancy, but I always think it's best to get external advice first so that someone's not, you know, internally trying to pull levers, but can give you honest advice on what you need to do. And so definitely go and see Kimberly Gilmore at Sprinkler if you need that. Good plug. So then, like you go in, you're doing good projects at Xero, but you made a big name for yourself, right? Like you seem to pop up everywhere at Xero. Xero seemed to be the role that there was like a catalyst for like, holy fuck, Penny's sort of everywhere. Was that something strategic for yourself, or was it just something that came with the natural growth of Xero?
That was natural growth of Xero. There was definitely, I was at that point trying to build more of a brand around, because I wanted to change the people industry and how it was perceived. There was sort of an intentional piece around the brand of some of the work we were doing and how we were doing it differently. But overall, I would say it was just kind of riding that, you know, Xero rocket ship, for want of a better analogy.
Awesome. What do you look back now in your time and say that this was the most memorable time at Xero? And then opposite of that, what did you fucking hate the most?
The most memorable time? I think some of the work we did around sales capability, and that sounds really boring. But
is that because you're unlocking business rather than just doing
exactly? That was, the sales team had got to a point where you're using accountants to sell software, and that wasn't necessarily scaling, because that's going to get to a certain point. But actually, how do we bring in either how do we build the capability for them to become great salespeople, and what capability is that, and then, you know, how do we bring in salespeople that are also going to be able to kind of build that industry knowledge? So it was an unlock. It was in the revenue space. You invest this time and this energy and help them kind of define their capabilities and develop help them recruit better. You know, immediately you can see the impact in that in terms of how sales teams perform against their target. So that for me was wow, there is work we can do in this space that's immediately going to, you know, help with revenue, help the overall business. Can I
ask you a question on that? Because I think largely people and culture, and I'm keen to get to your thoughts on, as you now are a CEO in a company, how does your thoughts looking at people and culture backwards now changed? But I think largely with people and culture, my frustrations with them is that they largely don't feel like they have the confidence to be able to go into these teams and have those conversations outside their remit of, is everyone feeling okay?
Yeah.
Can we do anything better?
Yeah.
It's because they don't feel like they can unlock business or have the confidence.
Yeah.
And so what was it about you, and what do you think other people can do to be able to do that? Because most P&T wouldn't go into a sales team and go, I can fucking help here.
Yeah. I think actually part of this was some of the chorus training. I remember my boss at the time, Sarah, who was an incredible mentor, was very clear. If you're on the people team, you don't sit within the people team physically, because back in the day when everyone was in offices and 5 days a week, you go and sit in amongst the technology team. You go and sit in amongst the legal team. We can come together as a team, but like your job is to support them. So you go and get in amongst those groups. And I think I've always taken that. I spend a lot of time in companies just job shadowing, sitting in amongst teams, understanding what their challenges are, asking questions about how things work, probably sometimes a little bit annoyingly to some teams, but just that curiosity to understand what's going on. And then you can ask questions, go, oh, if that's happening, what would happen if we did this? And because you've taken the time to get to know people, you understand all the components. When you ask those questions, it's not like, who are you asking these questions? It's like, you've already built a little bit of understanding. So in Xero was in amongst the sales team, understanding what they were doing, what was their processes like, what was a sales consultation like, how did leads come in, really just trying to understand, if we're going to build these capabilities, when do you need them? What are the skills needed to do an outbound call? Yeah. What does a sales consultation look like? What is a sales process? How do we maintain all the details of our leads? Just trying to get into all of that kind of detail and understanding. And so I think that confidence comes from just going and learning from people, getting out in the business, just sitting, observing their work. And then you build up rapport. So it's easier to kind of make a dick of yourself and ask stupid questions. And then 2, you just have a little bit more understanding, and you connect the dots and you come from a different perspective and you pose those questions back and you get a little bit more, discussion and buy-in.
Yeah, and you democratize, right? Like it's not an us and them. People actually believe you, right? They believe you want to learn about them, so they're prepared to give you the information that you need to learn.
Yeah.
And so awesome. So I think you avoided the question. I said, what did you hate about Xero?
Oh, what did I hate? Oh, I mean, this is a symptom of a lot of startups that kind of founder energy on one side is great from like things moving forward. On the other side, when you're supporting a business and Rod would come in and be like, we're spinning up this function, we need 300 people and we are going after the rod bomb. Rod bomb. Yeah. We're going to spin up this function. And then you've got all this team going, how does that impact me? What's happening? Is our strategy changing? You just have so much more rework. Yeah. And people, upset or displaced. You would be moving forward, and then suddenly let's go 10 steps back, placate everyone, make sure everyone is bought in, they understand what's going on, and then let's get back to where we were. So that...
Frustrating.
Yeah, frustrating.
That's largely what my team would say about me too. So that'd be like Troy fucking comes in, says all this shit, and then walks out the room. Yeah. Cool. All right. And then you became the chief people officer at Venn, like after Kirsty and I left.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that would have been a tough, challenging time, because you came in post like the redundancies and the restructuring, right?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
You're just like, I can fucking fix this shit? Or was it like, I feel like I can do justice? Or...
Yeah, it was a bit of both, right? I think a lot of the challenges that Vend had at that time around communication and structure and tying, roles and people functions sort of into goals overall, I'd done in previous organizations. I was like, great, there's sort of a semblance of things that I can come in and do here. And then I also just had immense respect for what had been built. Yeah. And I didn't want it to be pulled apart, right? Which is natural at that point in time to come in and change everything, but try and get to the bottom of what was really great that we need to retain. Yeah. And then, as we look to kind of change the culture a little bit, how do we kind of build on top of that? But also wanting to preserve the great things, because it had a great employment brand, it had some incredible talent, and still does today. So how do we preserve that, but then also, how can we put in a little bit more structure in some of the pieces that I'd learned from working in more corporate environments. Startups obviously have an aversion to corporate, but a lot of the stuff they've done, when you strip it back, is actually, it's good work. Yeah. So how do we kind of layer that into Vend and actually put a little bit more structure and process around it, so people know, why they're paid, what they're paid, where their next role looks like. Just put in some of that structure, but also retain the get shit done sort of attitude.
Yeah. Knowing both Rod and Vaughan,
Yep.
different chaps completely, right?
Yep.
What was the differences that you had to change or learn when you're working with someone like Vaughan versus Rod?
Yeah, I'd say I worked more with Alex.
Oh yeah.
As he was coming in.
Actually, he came in.
Yeah. So I sort of joined kind of him at that time. Vaughan stepping into more of that sort of product. Was he CPO, Chief Products Officer? More of that.
Chief. I used to be the founder title.
Yeah. Exactly. And so he had very clear views on what needed to be retained, which was very valuable, because if at any time you could kind of
Alex,
Vaughan. Sort of a bit of a sniff test, right? Like, we want to roll this out, and if he had an allergic reaction to it, we'd go, okay, this probably needs a bit more refinement. And then Alex coming in, who comes from a management consulting background, which is quite different and sort of different to my working style, and sort of finding what works in between that was an incredible time.
Was there a challenge? Like, was there lots of arguments or? No, I want to say arguments, robust conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah, because Alex is McKinsey consultant.
Yeah.
Penny strategically said one day at Chorus, I'm going to work for Vend and Xero because they seem to have the coming. And how old were you as the Chief People Officer at Vend?
26.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Shit yeah.
Yeah.
Holy shit yeah.
Yeah.
And then Vaughan, who by his own admission on the podcast, he was like, I was making shit up as I was going, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting dynamic, you know, of people to be working together.
Yeah. We had some incredible debates, discussion. Some of the things I've kind of taken on now is this willingness to just openly debate and put yourself in opposing sides. Like, Alex would have this kind of technique when we were in debates that we would switch sides and each kind of argue the other side and then switch back.
Like Steelman it.
Yeah. And it was just so useful to also put yourself outside of what you were trying to push or what employees were asking you for, and really look at it from all sides. Whilst, trying to retain the culture, but trying to build, it was, incredible in that space.
Yeah, awesome. And so do you feel imposter syndrome as a 26-year-old in an exec role?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I met the team, VP and Jordo and I went out for kind of a drink.
I love VP and Jordo.
Incredible. Yeah. Some of the best people. I remember going out for kind of a pre-drink with them before I joined, and we were sitting next to someone, and someone asked how old I was. And then I said how old I was, and just VP and Jordo's faces were just like, and I was like, oof, didn't really have that much I had some imposter syndrome before that, but kind of seeing their reaction, I'm like, oh, that's sort of a more...
Because you would have been younger than VP and the same age as Jordo maybe, or a little bit older than Jordo.
Slightly older, yeah. Coming in as their boss, leading this function after the organisation's just gone through kind of this much change. So it always felt like there was that extra, I've got to push myself. I've got to work harder than anyone else. I need to, be kind of at the top of my game, right? So I think...
Is that a good thing? Hashtag hustle culture, right? So we are, we talk about this a little bit on the pod. I have mixed emotions on this because I feel like if I didn't put myself into those positions where I had to push myself to places that I didn't think I'd be able to go, I wouldn't be the person that I am, and I wouldn't be the capable person that I am.
Yeah.
But definitely did some burnout shit along the way.
Definitely. I feel quite torn on this.
Give me your honest opinion.
I think overall, hustle is positive.
Yeah.
I think it is required to a certain extent, particularly in this startup space. I think that is when you go into it, if you are looking to kind of do the impossible, if you're looking to go into an organization and make incremental change, you can do that and have a really good balance.
Yep.
If you are looking to completely break the system, there is a certain nature of there is a very competitive environment when we look at a global level and we look at how fast other countries are able to spin up competing companies to us. So there is a level of putting in the work, going above and beyond that I think is required in startups. I think if I look back on my time, I probably could have worked a little bit, smarter. That sounds really cliche, that kind of smarter, not harder. I think if I'd had a few more mentors around me at that time, they probably could have saved me some overwork. It's sometimes just overproducing, over-explaining, putting in way too much research for something that would have been fine as a few bullet points on a piece of paper. So I think hustle in terms of the end kind of work output
Yeah.
is valuable. I think having a really good team of like mentors and advisors around you that they can go, you're totally just overcooking it,
Yeah.
is worthwhile. And having that around you gets a little bit more balance.
I think that's good advice. My take on it is that I call it performance culture instead of hustle culture, right? Like hustle is just a word, I think hustle's dirtied the saying a little bit. But if you want to be an outlier, you have to fucking work hard and push yourself to places that you didn't think you could go.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be an outlier, that's totally fine, right? We need people that can do the job 9 to 5. We need people that can do their thing, go home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But we also need people to push us to places that we haven't necessarily been so that the company can evolve and grow as well. And
Definitely.
But be careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
because everyone that I know that gets there after hustling for a long time, has got some pretty big scars because of it. And so,
which is it's not that healthy. I think there is that split between what is good hustle versus bad hustle.
Yeah.
And what is bad hustle is just trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it, right? That having good mentors around you that know, because in New Zealand and in Australia to a degree, we don't have the niche, or the niche as the Americans would say, right? Niche skills of people that are absolute experts in that space, that if you need some information, you can say, all right, well, who's the specialist for pricing in SaaS in the education space, in Vermont? And there's a person, right? There's a lady or a man or a person, right? And so here we're just generalists, so we have to work harder and hustle, to learn a little bit. And so, interesting. And so, good time at Venn. Then, by the sounds of it, enjoyed it. What made you leave?
I met Jamie. Really, I had no real plans to leave, and then I met Jamie, I think, for a coffee one day.
Jamie is the founder of Crimson.
Crimson, yes, Jamie Barton. So I met him for coffee. He was 21 at the time. I think that I met him for coffee, and he sort of shared his vision for Crimson and what it would eventually turn into be. And I think at that point it was about 40 people. And the questions he asked, how he was thinking about the people function, he hadn't been a manager before, so didn't have that sort of huge wealth of management experience or in other organizations, yet this vision to build this organization, and didn't have any kind of leadership coach people roles on his team at that time. And I went, this is my chance to do something pretty incredible and do something from scratch. And I think that was one piece from Vend, coming in off an incredible team who've done incredible work to date. You're always kind of building on
Wasn't yours.
Yeah, Troy did this, or Kirsty did this, or what have you, and the team overall. And then going into Crimson, I'm like, well, nobody has touched this before.
Yeah,
the culture we build.
Thank you for insinuating that I had any legacy at Ben, by the way. I appreciate that.
It's definitely it was the association. Some incredible work, and then Crimson, I was like, this is it. I can make a name, make a mark, build something, have it be fully my own, build a people team from scratch, really relook at the people function. Because when you work with someone who has no prior experience working with a people team before, it's liberating. There is no constraint on what it can do.
And it's daunting. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be really honest, right? I remember thinking, fuck, Penny, good luck. That's going to be a challenge. Like you've really thrown yourself into the fire now. And there was the external talk of, because Jamie was a young CEO and people didn't understand what the company was. They were like, what the fuck's that company? It's a scam or this and that, right? And so there was all this pressure. And I remember thinking, I don't know her very well, but I'm nervous for her, right? So fucking good on you.
I had a lot of text messages at that time. I think actually one from yourself calling it snake oil, if I recall correctly. Which wasn't the only one, right? This was Jamie studying in America, so very kind of aggressive with his ambition, and that just went against the New Zealand ecosystem at that time. And I got a lot of pushback and a lot of messages, and I'm like, no, we can build something great. He is the type of person that is never going. He's just not going to fail. That is not in his nature. And at the same time, give you so much autonomy to build something on that scale. Like, it was a pretty big leap of faith from him to also bring me on at that time. So
fuck yeah. And that's definitely something for me, right, that I'm trying to reflect on and be a better person about, because I hear so much shit, right? And I'm like, I want to be able to make my own mind about people going forward, and I want to be able to have them look them in the eyes and give them the credibility and the oxygen they deserve. And so, but I think that's really cool, and it shows testament to your character and your person, right? And so then you go in to do the CPO role there, and then all of a sudden, next minute, I hear you're going back to do the CE role, right?
Yeah.
So let's not gloss over the stuff that you did at Crimson, because I think it's great.
Yeah.
But what I'm really excited to talk to you about is like what the fuck in the start? Like, so how do you become, like, I know that you're an amazing person and employee, and you would have been a sad miss when you left the role, but how do you say to yourself, okay, now I'm going to be the CEO?
Yeah. I guess I also, and I forgot to mention this, back in Chorus days, I was like, I want to be the CEO.
Yeah.
That was what I'm going to put on my
There's
development
a bit of a theme in your background of like visualizing your future, right?
Yeah, I was maybe 3 or 4 years into the kind of people space. I look back now, I was like, oh, that was naive, but I'm going to be the CEO. And the CEO at the time said to me, Penny, that is not a job for you. You are not going to do well in that profession. I was like, okay.
I'll fucking show you, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Did you send he or she a little message?
No, I did it. And to be fair, he was right. That iteration of myself was in no way kind of ready or prepared for that. And it was a very naive thing to say, but always kind of had this vision around it. So when I went into Crimson, again, without any kind of constraints of what a people function could do, whilst my title was Chief People Officer, my remit when I started, I think my first week, Jamie said, we are going to launch into 15 markets in the next 3 months. So launch 15 markets. You think of organizations now who go, we may expand into the US in a year.
We'll go to Australia first, though.
Let's test the waters in the UK.
Yeah.
But 15 markets in 3 months, go.
Wow.
And so it was, people and culture and helping define all of that. But at the same time, it was, how do we make these markets viable? How do we compensate people that aligns to like emerging markets? What is the regulations in these markets? It was so much more than a people function. At the same time, coaching leaders, and what I love about Crimson is that people can be in roles that don't have that experience before, but just have that like ambition and the innate skill to do it, and they develop into it. And so working with those types of individuals that, are just developing as they go, they're incredibly spongy. You can sort of set them off on one path and you see where they kind of come out, and it's pretty amazing. So working with them through this time, launching markets, we went from...
It seems like more of a chief of staff role that you were in, right?
I would say in those early days, it was much more reflective of that. It was comms, it was strategy, it was people, it was sort of whatever was needed, and eventually evolved into, I managed marketing for a little bit, got involved in technology and product at times, ran one of the business units. Again, with that, like a people team is unblocking whatever your challenge is at that time in an organization. Moving upstream and going, this is a challenge, I'm just going to jump in and fix it. So if it means that I need to lead a team, or I need to kind of get in and look at how we're doing, technology development, or how we're setting our product strategy, I'll just jump in there and do it. So that was the remit, whatever needed to be done.
Well, and was that Jamie... Grooming's a terrible word, but was that Jamie growing you into that role, or was that you naturally just saying, it's in my nature, I'm going to be CEO one day, so I want to learn these roles, or was it just naturally like, hey, something, I just need to sort that thing?
A bit of both. I think Jamie and I have always had conversations. My end goal is not a people role. Yeah. And so there was always him sort of challenging me to be like, I don't care that you've done that in the past, how should we do it now? Or I remember this vivid example. I'm not sure why this is burned into my brain, but we were looking at, we were just looking in some spreadsheet. We might have been looking at stock options or something. And he's like, well, just do the like Black-Scholes calculation. I was like, that feels well outside of my remit. How do I do that? And he's like, just learn how to do it. Just no starting point of, that's not in your remit, you don't need to do it, hand it to another team. It was, well, go talk to people, figure it out, and come back. And he'll obviously give guidance along the way. But that sort of, I don't know why that example specifically.
Well, I was just going to ask you something along the lines of, what was it about Jamie as a 21-year-old guy who was obviously super driven, visionary? Yeah. What did he unlock in you that others couldn't?
really that for him, experience means only so much, right? The actual just getting in and doing something and figuring out as you go and being really open to give something a go is much more important. So in other organizations, it'd be like, okay, well, what have you seen in the past that's worked and how can we adapt it? With Jamie, it's more, let's start from first principles and how do we redo this? And even then, if it's in another team or another function, how would you approach it? How would you kind of tackle this? If you were the CTO, what would you do? And those kind of conversations were very kind of empowering. You would still have lots of debates and discussion around it, but just unlocking that thinking of outside of a people function, anything is possible, still being reasonably young, you can learn anything, right?
Yeah.
If you get stuck in, you chat to people, you do the research, you learn some things, like you can achieve those things.
Yeah.
And I think his just sense of that genuinely everything is possible, which sounds very cliche, but that is just in his nature, just really unlocked that kind of putting yourself in a box, sort of self-limiting beliefs. Like he just wouldn't have time for that. So
Awesome. And now, so you find yourself in the CE role.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't find yourself in the CE role. You earned your way into the CE role.
Yeah.
And then you've sort of realised that all these skills that you've already been developing for the role.
Yeah.
Where did you feel uncomfortable though?
Yeah. So I'm still only about 2 months into it at this stage. I actually had a conversation with someone earlier this week, and they went, "How are you finding the CE role? That's the loneliest job in an organisation."
Yeah. Preach.
Yeah. But I also couldn't help but laugh. And I was like, have you ever been a chief people officer before?
Oh, true.
Because like everyone in an organisation has an opinion of what you're doing, right or wrong, just like a CEO.
Lonely and liked less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can walk in a room, some organisations will love you, some will go quiet when you walk in the room. You hear everything from everyone in the organisation, good or bad. And at the same time, you're trying to set the CEO up for success, so you don't necessarily kind of pick and choose what you pass on, right? Like what is most important for them to know right now to do their work versus what is just sort of periphery information. So you are always just taking in all of this information. It's an incredibly lonely job.
Do you get your team to shield you from that information, or do you ask for it because you've been in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I like to operate on full context, full transparency, and I will do the same. Good or bad. That's how I like to operate, and I've always found that in my roles, that's how you make the best decisions. So I'm sure there is an element of that, though, that is already kind of happening just by nature of the role. And so trying to break that down, just tell me everything that's going on. I've already kind of been at the end of a fire hose before and for a number of years in these roles, so I can take it. Just tell me whatever's going on.
Do you have to be nastier to be a CEO? Or not necessarily nastier, but do you have to be a little bit more cutthroat and conviction about your decision making than a CPO?
I think what's refreshing is I can share more of my thought process. When you're in a people role, you've made that decision in conjunction with people, and when you, let's say you're making a restructure or what have you, you're sort of delivering the party line. You can't share too much because that wasn't your decision to make, or the context can't be shared. What I found quite liberating is, oh, well, I'm in the CEO role, so I can share how I've made this decision, the thought process that went in, the data I looked at. I can just be open about all of that as opposed to needing to just kind of,
validate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, I like that word. Like, I definitely think out loud now because I have the safety and confidence to think out loud.
Definitely.
And I don't care if I make a dumb statement because I'm going on a thought experiment, trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
That's the luxury you have, I guess. So, well done, right? Like, this has been, how old are you now?
34, yeah.
This is like, Penny at 34 is now in a CEO for the last 2 months by design, has created an amazing career for herself, but also like worked really amazingly. And I'd love you to be able to like say, so what messages or what could you pass on about your career that someone, like some young person, some young girl, some young guy, anyone in any situation could be looking at that now and go, I'm 22, I'm in my first people and culture role, or I'm in an office manager role. How the fuck do I become a CEO at 34?
When you say it like that, that feels quite daunting. I think, like, one is to have a really clear vision of where you want to go, right? Starting out, I wanted to be in HR, laser focused on that. Then I wanted to be a CEO, and I sort of charted out a path, and I charted out what are the key skills and key experiences I'm going to need along the way to pick up for that, be it to move from a CPO to a CEO, I'll need to get a lot better at finance, data analytics, strategy. How do I make sure I'm intentionally picking up that experience along the way to get to that?
Did you get mentors? Did you just pick it up?
A bit of both, really. I think every CEO that I've worked with has been like a mentor in some capacity, in terms of, the great thing about being in a people and culture role or an office manager role, actually any supporting role, is you're in a lot of these meetings.
Yeah.
You are across a lot of these comms. Like, all of those things that you're seeing every day, you can learn from.
You've worked with great leaders in the country, right? And so you've been
incredible leaders. To sit with them in meetings and watch how they conduct themselves, how they handle Q&A, how they roll out a strategy, how they sort of handle adversity. Like, that's incredible experience to sit in amongst. And so all of them have been like a mentor in different aspects. I still do things today which I picked up from Alex. I do things that I picked up from Jamie. I do things I picked up from Mark back in Chorus, from Rod and Zero, and from Andy. There are elements of all of that incorporated in how I operate today, for sure.
The version of you that's in taking that knowledge and not trying to project someone else's, right?
Yeah.
And so,
you just pick out what feels natural, what feels yourself, right? But find every opportunity to just observe, read. I see people now that kind of switch off if it's not in their team. So I don't need to read that marketing strategy because I'm not in marketing, even though it's being shared. Read all the documents, talk to all the people, just build that sort of network and that curiosity. And if you do that with a clear vision in mind, you can start to kind of put your hand up for projects. You can start your own side hustle. And definitely a lot of the skills I learned were, I had food trucks for a portion of time. I ran my own consulting business. I did some mentorship work via that consulting company. I did what is now the restaurants on top of that as well. And because at that point in time, I wasn't getting the development I needed, my people remit was pretty full. And so I'm going to go and get the development outside of work in doing marketing, running my own business, balancing books. Those were experiences that I wanted to pick up along the way. And if I wasn't getting them internally, you go and seek them out by doing kind of things on the side, by doing additional learning. You just go and kind of pick it up. So.
Yeah. There's a theme on this podcast of the really interesting and successful people that I've chatted with that just always pushing themselves out of that comfort zone a little bit and always yearning for it. And like you say, when they don't get it somewhere, they're finding it in other places because they're always continuously looking to move. Do you think that's because we're all fucked up in some way from our childhood and we're trying to find something? Or do you think it's just because we're by design, that's what we want to be?
It's probably a bit of both, really.
For me, it's the childhood.
Just seeking some kind of validation, learning. And there's definitely elements of both. But the most successful people I've worked alongside do just have that, I'm going to go and learn it. I'm going to go and research. I'm going to go and talk to someone. People reach out to me now and just to ask questions, to have a coffee. I'm like, this is amazing. Do more of this. I say yes to, I think, every single person that does that because...
Be careful what you just said.
Sorry.
We'll edit it out.
Nearly every person. Because people who are going to take that initiative and kind of build that network, ask questions, put themselves in a position where they go, I don't have all the answers, they're going to do incredibly well.
Preach there.
Yeah.
Hey, so this has gone really fast, so I'm conscious that I want to say a few more things.
Oh, good.
But before I do, hello. So you're the CEO now of Crimson Education.
Crimson Global Academy.
Global Academy, excuse me. So what is Crimson Global Academy?
Yeah, it's an online private high school. Founded 3 years ago. This was Jamie's vision. I was at Crimson Education when he set this vision about creating an online school that made education more accessible, but allowed students to kind of accelerate at their own kind of level of competence versus age. Which was something he was really passionate about from his learning journey, and then also doing that with technology and enabling technology so you can have it around the world. He actually had this idea pre-COVID and launched just before COVID, and then that hit. I was like, wow, what kind of foresight is that?
Perfect timing.
So the school has been in operation for 3 years now. It's got just over 1,000 students in 55 countries globally.
Is this validation that universities can do this too?
Yeah, I think more and more universities are moving to an online or a bit of a hybrid. And I think absolutely, there is no there is value in person from a networking, from a community. And I think if you think about like community and belonging and really making the most of an educational experience, a lot of that's valuable to have in person. But a lot of that just digesting content, if you think about how we learn right now, might be from YouTube, it might be from a podcast, like having that kind of information available online at any time is very useful. What we've done though is a lot of online schools are just digest content, pairing that with incredible teachers to run like synchronous lessons anywhere in the world has been really the unlock for that. So a fully accredited school in New Zealand, and we operate 55 countries with a US pathway and an international pathway.
Wow, so global CEO, 55 countries.
Yeah. Team is about 135 people.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
Love
it's pretty amazing. It's something I'm very, from the people space, this kind of parallel with education and with students is very similar. Employee experience, student experience, building kind of learning pathways, setting people up for the future of work, building remote global communities. Like there are so many parallels with those businesses. It's kind of a natural, feels like quite a natural transition into that type of organization.
So then now this is where people, right? So when you reach a lofty goal, right? So you're now the CEO. Do you now reset yourself and say, okay, I'm probably going to be in this for the X amount of years. This is what I want to do next. Have you thought about that yet, or is it too early?
Might be a little bit early, but I think what I've learned in the last 3-4 years is just to be really happy being content. Like you don't always need to be chasing something. If you feel like you are learning and developing, it's not a title or a level. I definitely had that when I was younger. It was like goal, 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 and you're chasing those goalposts. And in the last few years, and probably as a result of being a mum, just being a lot more happy with just things being calm and kind of being in that zone and making the most of that. So a lot more open-minded to where things will go from here. Obviously have huge ambitions and goals for CGA, which we will see through, but also just being really comfortable with whatever my role is on that journey. It's a lot more kind of getting to here. I just feel a lot more like, okay, we're here. Let's make the most of it.
Did you celebrate that? Did you like that milestone?
Yeah, definitely. It's been a long time coming. It feels like a long time coming, but
yeah. Well, not really, but it's, it's when you are active in your aspirations, like you work hard and you live a lot of hours, right?
Yeah.
And so it probably
worked a lot of jobs.
Yeah, it really does feel like a long time, even though there's people out there that have been carving it out for 40 years.
Definitely. I mean, I was fortunate, right? You ride the technology boom. I rode the sort of like boom of the HR industry changing. They had both of those waves working on my side, right? There are other industries that are...
I've never met a CEO that got lucky in their job to get that job, mate. Just FYI.
Okay, fine. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Hey, this has been a really, really, really cool chat. I've really enjoyed this. I always like chatting with you. Yeah. I'm so glad that you didn't listen to my or anyone else's advice and just backed yourself because I think one of the things that like successful, like so Jamie and your success right in Crimson is that makes us as an industry have to improve ourselves, right? And it makes like us think, stop the whole tall poppy thing. And I've really been active on that, right? Like anytime I hear something about someone, I'm like, no, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to make and I hear a lot, like as a podcast host, they're like, don't ever get this person on. I'm like, well, I'm going to talk to them regardless and see. But I think it's really cool. Like, and I'm really pleased with what Crimson has done. They were down in that little front part of Venn back in the day and now, grown very big all over the world.
Yeah, definitely.
We're just losing some sort of light there, Jono. So this is like startup land for us in Auckland. Now Jono's laughing and so I'm really, it's been really cool, right? It's and I'm impressed with you, Jamie, and everyone involved in Crimson, and I'm really excited about the future of you in this new role. And a last little nugget. So you might have heard us talk about the what makes you happy question. We're now finalising with, like, if we're going to leave something in the show notes for someone that moved you so much that you'd like them to also see it. It may be a person, it may be a blog, it may be a book, it may be a website. What's the one thing that you would be like, that's the one?
Oof. I mean, having listened to the podcast, I was prepared for what makes you happy.
What's the answer to that then? Let's start with that.
Okay, well, I think from what you've heard from everything, I mean, what makes me happy is just learning something.
Yeah.
Just finding something new in completely unrelated areas and just digesting information. That makes me incredibly happy. What I would share, this is particularly topical, so I may have a little bit of recency bias, but I just finished reading the book Amp It Up. It's from the founder or CEO from Snowflake and ServiceNow, and he talked about the stages that organizations go through and how to essentially get rid of that bureaucracy. How you actually get your large organizations back to that sort of startup mentality, the decisions you need to make to really get that culture back, an increased level of autonomy. He has some quite interesting views about the role of customer support. Is that a function in itself, or is that everyone's job? So just really interesting thinking, and having witnessed from seed round to Series D at this point, and sort of all stages from about 10 to 1,000 people, you definitely, what he maps out, you see in every organization time and time again as they go through growth. That book puts a really practical lens into actually how to break it down. So that's one right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have the book up here that people can see. Jono's going to do that in post. It's just on the support thing, right? This is something that I'm particularly passionate about. And I've always said, I've got 3 tech startups myself at the moment, right? And I've always said to everyone, if it takes off and we have a big business, my theory is that we should only have a 50% support team and 50% should come within the business. And we cycle people in and out of support. So they always know exactly what customers are saying. They know the pain that support go through. They know the nuances of how support and how the business is looking at it, how the customers are talking about it. And so
absolutely. And I would take the same learning and apply it to people. The moment you make it a function in of itself, people just devolve responsibility to it.
Yeah.
So people and culture and customer support should be the responsibility of everyone. Cycling kind of your talent in throughout those functions is a great move that we should make. And really thinking about actually, which we talked about earlier, what is the purpose of those functions in your organization? Are you devolving those responsibilities out to them? And actually it should be part of the way an organization operates.
Awesome. Hey, great chatting with you, Penny. I can't stop. I don't want to stop you from being Prime Minister in 10 minutes. And so I'm going to let you go. But
Perfect.
Really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, it was really fun. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Thanks so much for coming on, Penny. I really enjoyed the chat. There was a really nice and comfortable moment where you called me out and said that I sent you a text about snake oil. Look, I'm going to be honest, I did. And it's something that I've reflected on. And it's things that I'm trying to do now and change myself. And hopefully by talking about this a little bit more, it starts people reflecting as well. We've got to give better opportunities at space and oxygen and trust and love to these startup founders. And I'm really glad that Penny joined Crimson. I'm really glad that she has, helped the team grow. I'm really glad for the whole team and what they're doing there. And she just called me out on it. And so this is, what I think public discourse should be, right? Say your piece, be really honorable and integrity driven with it, and give people the love and respect that they need. And so Penny, fantastic woman, fantastic human, really has done some awesome things. And so I'm excited to see where the next 2 years goes in the next role and on from there. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for watching us. Thanks so much to Icehouse Ventures, which is our Auckland home for the podcast. I'm really enjoying it here. We are really starting to grow now. Like the numbers are really picking up in terms of who's watching and who's subscribing. I just want to say thank you for those that are subscribing. I'd love it if you can leave a comment below. I'd love it if you can share and give us some feedback on what you're liking and what you're disliking. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time. Thank you.
This podcast is produced by John Otaka from Empire Films.